I used to think the beginning of the end would come like a thunderclap. Loud, sudden, violent. But the truth is, endings are quiet. They arrive in small, forgettable moments. In the way a voice flattens during goodbyes, in how two toothbrushes sit untouched on a shared counter, in the space between questions that once led to laughter but now trail into silence. That's how it began with us. Quietly. Jared Whitmore and I had been married for 5 years. Our wedding had been beautiful, minimal, elegant, carefully curated like everything he did. He wore a black tailored tux, his face calm and assured, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman in the world. He wasn't a fairy tale kind of man. No grand gestures or candlelit poems. But he was reliable. Thoughtful. He called when he said he would. He remembered the little things, how I liked my coffee, the way I needed silence when I read, how my fingers curled around his shirt when I slept. We were quiet but constant. And for a long time I thought that meant we were strong. Lately, though, the quiet had begun to stretch. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that hovers between two people and asks 1,000 unanswered questions. Jared was working longer hours. We were speaking less and less in the mornings. When he came home, he kissed me on the cheek, not the mouth. His eyes were always somewhere else. I told myself it was stress. The firm was in the middle of a merger and he'd been pulled into late-night calls with legal teams. I didn't press him. I never pressed him. But I started to notice the shift. The way he flinched when I touched his shoulder. The phone turned face down on the table. The new passcode he didn't bother explaining. And the way he never asked anymore, "How was your day?" I began spending my afternoons alone, drifting through coffee shops and parks, pretending to read while watching the world go by. Sometimes I wandered into bookstores and picked up children's books without meaning to. One day I stayed too long. And when I came home, Jared was already there. He looked up from his laptop. "You didn't text." I didn't think I needed to. His eyes returned to the screen. "Just let me know next time." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like I was a minor inconvenience in the middle of his perfectly managed day. That night I stood in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me didn't look broken. Just muted. As if someone had dialed down her color. I touched my stomach without thinking. I didn't know yet. Not for sure. But something in me already knew. The next morning I made a quiet appointment. Nothing dramatic. No racing heart or nervous panic. Just a routine test at a clinic across town. The receptionist didn't recognize me, and that felt like a small mercy. I sat in the waiting room with my coat buttoned and hands trembling, listening to the soft beeps and clicks of other lives being examined behind closed doors. When the nurse finally brought me in, I smiled politely and said, "I just want to confirm." She nodded, efficient and kind. 10 minutes later, she handed me the paper with the results. Positive. I folded it and placed it in my bag. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just walked home with the knowledge tucked close to my ribs like a secret. A heartbeat. Quiet and new. That evening I made dinner. Jared didn't show. He texted, "Late night. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time. Then deleted it. Over the next few days I adjusted to the knowledge like someone stepping into cold water, inch by inch. It was still too early to tell anyone. Too early to decide what it meant. But every time I touched my stomach I thought of names. Of futures. Of what this child could be, if raised in peace, not tension. Jared began staying out more often. He claimed it was the merger. The stress. That he was doing this for us. But I stopped believing his words when his eyes no longer met mine. And I didn't ask where he was going. Because I was too busy figuring out where I needed to be. I began making lists. Not baby names, not yet. But backup plans. Accounts I could separate. Documents I needed copies of. Things I would need if I had to do this alone. Not because I was certain he would leave. But because I wasn't certain he would stay. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. I waited for the right moment to tell him. To sit him down and say, "You're going to be a father." But every time I rehearsed it I pictured his face. Like the way he looked at me when he asked why I was still home in the middle of the day. Like I was intruding. One Friday night he came home earlier than usual. No warning. No smile. He dropped his keys on the counter and said, "You're not working again?" I blinked. "I took a break this week." "Why?" I searched his face for a trace of softness. "I needed rest." He grunted. "We don't have time for rest. Not right now." And just like that, the air between us snapped tight. I wanted to scream, because I'm pregnant. But I didn't. Not yet. I wanted him to see me first. That night, I laid in bed beside him, watching his chest rise and fall, my hand pressed over my stomach. And I made a decision. Tomorrow I would tell him. Not because I believed he'd be happy, but because I needed to say it out loud. For me. For the child. For the woman I was becoming. The morning I decided to tell him, the city was cloaked in rain. A soft drizzle that washed the noise off the sidewalks, turned car horns into murmurs, and made everything feel gentler than it was. I stood at the kitchen window watching the gray spill across the glass, one hand curled around a warm cup of tea, the other resting gently against my lower abdomen. It wasn't showing yet, but I could feel it. Not just in my body, but in the way I moved, the way I breathed, the way I listened more closely to everything around me. I was carrying life. And the man who helped create it didn't even know. Jared came down the stairs later than usual. Hair slightly damp from a rushed shower, blazer wrinkled like he'd pulled it from the back of a chair. He didn't say good morning. He hadn't in weeks. He reached for the car keys on the counter. I need to talk to you, I said. He stopped. Looked at me. I'm late. It won't take long. He sighed like I'd asked him to stay for hours. That sigh told me everything I needed to know. But I said it anyway. I'm pregnant. Silence. The kind that isn't soft or sacred. The kind that clangs in your chest and leaves bruises. His hand dropped from the keys. You're what? 10 weeks, I said. Confirmed. He blinked. I watched the words register in his face like a slap he wasn't expecting. Not rage. Not joy. Just shock. Followed by something far worse. Resentment. Jesus, Mara, he muttered, turning away from me. You're serious? I didn't move. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. And you waited this long to tell me? I wanted to be sure. I thought maybe it would feel like the right time. The right time. His laugh was hollow. Mara, we talked about this. You knew I wasn't ready for kids. No, I said steady. You said we'd wait. You never said never. He turned, eyes sharp. You knew what I meant. My voice dropped. You never once asked if I was ready. You just assumed we'd wait until it was convenient for you. He stepped back like the words had landed somewhere he wasn't expecting. So what? You decided to take that choice away from me. It was like being doused in ice. I didn't take anything from you, I said. This happened. Life happened. You act like that excuses everything. I'm not excusing anything, Jared. I'm telling you. Because I thought maybe some part of you would want this. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. And then he said it. The sentence that split me open. I feel like you trapped me. The room didn't move. But I did. I stepped backward just once. Just enough. And nodded. I see. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, I said, voice brittle. You did. He ran both hands over his face. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. And yet it's happening, I said. To both of us. Whether you like it or not. He sat down heavily on the edge of a stool. Rubbed his eyes. I need time, he said. Time. I had already given him that. Weeks of waiting. Of holding it in. Of hoping for a moment that never came. I'm keeping it, I said. His eyes flicked to mine. I figured. I'll do it alone if I have to. He stood. You don't have to do anything alone. I didn't say I was walking away. No, I said quietly, but you made it very clear this isn't something you want. I didn't ask for this. And I didn't ask for a man who would treat his unborn child like a trap. He left. Of course he did. Not in a storm of slamming doors or yelling matches. Just grabbed his jacket and keys. Said, I'll call you later. And disappeared into the rain. I didn't cry. Thought I would. Thought I'd collapse the second the door shut. But instead I stood still in the middle of the kitchen, hand on my belly, and whispered, You are not a mistake. You are not a trap. You are a beginning. I made a vow then. To never let my child feel unwanted. To never speak about their father with venom. To protect their heart, even if mine had just been crushed under the weight of silence. Days passed. No call. No message. Just radio silence. He was doing what he always did when confronted with something emotional. Shutting down. On the 5th day I went to my OB-GYN for a checkup. The nurse asked if my partner would be joining. I said no. When she asked if I wanted the heartbeat recorded, I nodded. The sound filled the small white room like a drum in a cathedral. Fast. Strong. Sure. I closed my eyes and let it wrap around me. I started moving money. Not dramatically. Not suspiciously. Just shifting pieces. A savings account in my name only. A safe deposit box with important documents. A private meeting with a lawyer I trusted. One who specialized in family law and asset protection. I wasn't filing for anything. Not yet. But I was preparing. Because if Jared believed I had trapped him, then I couldn't afford to wait for him to grow into the man I needed. 2 weeks after the confession, he came home. Without warning. Walked into the house like nothing had happened. I was sitting on the couch, reading. My body already beginning to change. He sat across from me. "You look different," he said. "I am," I replied. He hesitated. "I've been thinking." "About leaving?" "No," he said quickly. "About what this means. For us." "There is no us," I said, "unless you're ready to accept this child." He flinched. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn this into a punishment." "This isn't a punishment," I said. "This is a consequence. Of your words. Of your absence. Of your silence." He was quiet. And for once I let the silence stay. Because I had learned that silence, when chosen, is power. "I need time," he said again. "No," I said gently. "What you need is honesty. And what I need is peace." He stood. Stared at me. Then said the last thing I ever needed to hear. "I'm sorry you're doing this without me. But I can't force something I don't feel." He turned to leave. I didn't stop him. Not this time. Because I finally understood. This wasn't the end of my life. It was the start of ours. Me and the child I already loved more than anything. Some departures don't come with slammed doors or packed bags. Some unravel with a pen, a password change, a cold signature on a document no one talks about. That's how I left Jared. Not physically. Not yet. But piece by piece. Silently. Intentionally. And entirely on my terms. After the night he told me, "I can't force something I don't feel," something in me closed. Not violently. Just with finality. Like a book snapping shut in the middle of a sentence because the rest wasn't worth reading. I stopped asking where he went. Stopped waiting for him to notice the gentle swell of my stomach. The way I walked slower now. The way I moved with more care, because I wasn't just carrying myself anymore. I was carrying someone who deserved better than a father who saw them as a burden. I met with my lawyer again. Grace Bellamy. Sharp-eyed, composed, and compassionate. The kind of woman who didn't ask questions that weren't necessary. We sat in her corner office on Lexington Avenue while the city buzzed beneath us. "I'm not divorcing him," I said. "Not yet." She nodded. "Then what are we doing?" "We're preparing," I said. Quietly. Cleanly. Grace smiled. "I like clean." We began with the assets. Jared and I had 3 joint accounts. 2 for household expenses, 1 for long-term investments. Grace helped me separate what I was entitled to. There were no dramatic withdrawals. I moved funds over time. Quiet. By the end of the month I had a trust in my name only. For me. For the baby. I also began rerouting my mail to a P.O. box. Switched my health insurance to an individual plan. Opened a new credit card. Updated my will. Not because I expected disaster. But because I refused to be unprotected. I refused to let him hold the keys to a life he no longer valued. Jared, meanwhile, became even more distant. He stayed at work late, even on weekends. When he was home he kept to himself. We rarely spoke. Sometimes he'd ask things like, "Are you feeling okay?" But never with real curiosity. More like someone checking a box. I stopped answering with warmth. I simply said, "Yes," and left it there. At my 14-week appointment, I asked the doctor not to list the father's information on the records. "Just me," I said. "That's all that matters." She didn't ask why. But she nodded. And in that moment I felt something shift again. A soft, internal click. Not just of the child but of the journey. I started journaling again. At night, while the city pulsed outside the window, I'd sit on the couch with my hands resting on my belly and write. "Today you moved when I was reading. You like music, I think. Especially piano. Your father hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. I don't think he's angry. I think he's indifferent. That hurts more. But it's okay. Because I'm learning how to be whole again. I didn't write his name. I didn't need to. One afternoon I came home early and found him on the phone in his office. The door was ajar. His voice was low, tight. Frustrated. No. I told you I don't want to talk about it anymore. Because it's not my responsibility. She made the decision. There was silence. Then, she said she's keeping it. What do you want me to do? I'm stuck. Stuck. I walked away before I heard anything else. That night he didn't ask where I'd been. And I didn't ask who was on the other end of the line. I stopped sleeping in our bed. Told him it was for my back. I started sleeping in the guest room. First he noticed. Then he didn't. Which only confirmed what I already knew. He didn't miss me. I hired a doula. A lovely woman named Lenora with a soft voice and fierce intelligence. She met me at cafes and appointments, helped me map out birth plans, postpartum care, emergency contacts. She never asked about the father. But on the third meeting she said, "You're doing this alone, aren't you?" I didn't deny it. "I'm doing this quietly," I said. She smiled. "That's often the strongest way." I also started seeing a therapist. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to stay intact. Dr. Corinne Ferris. Mid-40s, sharp bob, eyes like she could see past every word. She asked, "Do you love him?" I thought about it. Then said, "I don't think so. I think I loved the idea of him. And now, I'm in love with who I am when I'm away from him." She nodded. "That's a good place to begin." Week by week I peeled away the life we built. Not bitterly. Not destructively. Just with clarity. I sold the painting he bought me for our second anniversary. Deleted the anniversary video from my phone. Threw away the jacket he always said I looked best in, because I realized I no longer cared to dress for him. And one morning I opened our wedding album, and closed it without looking past the first page. We had dinner once that week. A tense, silent affair. He commented on the pasta. Said it needed salt. I nodded. He never asked how the baby was doing. I didn't offer. That night I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth when he walked by. He paused. "Are you okay?" he asked. The question was strange. Out of context. Maybe even guilt-laced. But I met his eyes in the mirror and said, "Yes. I'm getting stronger." He didn't reply. Just walked away. The next morning he left early. Left his wedding band on the counter. No note. No message. I stared at it for a long time. Then picked it up. And dropped it in a drawer without a word. Some choices don't need to be announced. You just make them. And the world shifts accordingly. That was the morning I drew the line. Not in a fight. Not with a scream. But with a signature. It had been almost 2 months since I told Jared I was pregnant. The baby was nearly 4 months along now. I'd begun to show a gentle curve where there had once been flatness. My clothes fit differently. My breath came slower. My sleep lighter. But Jared hadn't changed. Not once did he ask if I'd picked names. He never touched my stomach. Never joined me for doctor's visits. He hadn't even asked if it was a boy or girl. Because in his mind this pregnancy didn't belong to him. Only the consequence did. I arrived at Grace's office on a Thursday morning. The rain from earlier had cleared, leaving the city washed clean but humid. I wore white. A cotton dress that made me look like peace, because I'd found it in places Jared never noticed. Grace greeted me with her usual calm. "Are you ready?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. She opened a folder, pulled out the separation documents. They weren't divorce papers, not yet. But everything else was there. Financial independence. Custody rights. A formal withdrawal from shared accounts. The transfer of property leases into my name only. I didn't tremble. I didn't blink. I signed every page. My hand was steady. My voice silent. It was done. "You know," Grace said as she gathered the pages, "a lot of women come in here looking for revenge." "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want freedom." She smiled. "That's rarer than you think." I didn't go home right away. I walked to a small cafe in the West Village where they played soft jazz and served lemon cake that reminded me of my grandmother. I ordered a slice and tea and sat by the window. And for the first time in months, I felt light. Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd stopped waiting for someone who chose to stay stuck. That night, I returned home to a quiet apartment. Jared hadn't come back. He'd been staying out more often lately. Some nights at his office. Some nights who knew where. But I no longer cared. I had stopped wondering. I had stopped hoping. I wasn't his wife anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I placed a manila envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, a copy of the signed documents, the new banking information, and a note. Jared, this is no longer your burden. It never was. This is my child. My future. And my choice. You are free. And so am I. Mora. He came home around midnight. I heard the door unlock, his footsteps across the hardwood. I stayed in the guest room. Didn't get up. I knew the moment he saw the envelope. Heard the silence stretch. A door opened. Paused. Closed. He didn't come to me. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even after reading everything I'd finally made clear. 2 days later, he broke the silence. I was sitting in the living room, folding a basket of baby clothes my sister had sent me. He stood at the doorway, pale, sleep-deprived. You're leaving me, he said. I already left, I said gently. You just didn't notice. He blinked. You didn't say anything. I did, I said. The day I told you I was pregnant. He sat down slowly, like the weight of it all had finally reached his bones. I didn't ask for this. I know. And I didn't expect you to walk away. I met his eyes. I didn't walk away. I walked forward. There's a difference. He rubbed his hands together. Restless. I don't know how to fix this. You don't. He looked up. Then what do I do? I paused. Let the silence rest between us like a mirror. You start by telling the truth, I said. To you. To yourself. He didn't respond. Said he left again. But this time I didn't feel abandoned. I felt released. The next day I moved into the apartment I'd secretly rented downtown. A quiet 2-bedroom with big windows, light wooden floors, and a nursery just waiting to be filled with color. Lenore helped me settle in. My sister sent a care package. Ava came by with groceries and candles that smelled like lavender and clean pages. And for the first time in months I let myself cry. Not from grief. But from the relief of no longer living in a house where love had to be proven to survive. 2 weeks later a letter arrived. No return address. I knew the handwriting. Jared. Mora. I'm sorry. For the way I reacted. For the things I didn't say. For the father I don't know how to be. I wasn't trapped. I was terrified. I let fear turn into resentment. And you didn't deserve that. If you don't want me to be part of this, I'll respect it. But if there's any part of you that wants me to try, I will. Not to win you back. But to show our child that they were always wanted, even if I was late in saying it. Jared. I read it twice. Then placed it in the drawer with his wedding ring. Because even if he meant it, I had already built a world without needing it. The apartment became a haven. Soft lighting, fresh flowers from the corner florist, baby books scattered like promises. I wasn't trying to forget Jared. I just no longer felt tethered to the version of myself who waited for him to choose me. Now I was choosing myself. Choosing my child. Choosing quiet strength over noisy sorrow. Lenora came by weekly to help set up the nursery. She brought wooden animal figurines and paint samples, always listening, never prying. One afternoon she stood in the doorway, arms crossed as she watched me hang a mobile above the crib. You've done all of this without him, she said. I smiled. Yes. You proud of that? I looked at her. Steady. Sure. I'm proud of who I became when he stepped back. Dr. Ferris, my therapist, asked me once if I thought Jared would come back. I'd shrugged. Maybe. And if he does? I'll listen, I said. But I won't wait. Because growth doesn't mean slamming doors. It means you learn how to close them gently, and walk away before you start knocking again. The baby kicked for the first time one Friday morning. It was subtle. A flick. Like a secret between us. I placed my hand on my belly and laughed. You're going to be strong, I whispered. Just like your mama. Around that time, Ava invited me to join her in Greece. Just for a week. To breathe, she said. To remember who you are outside of this. It was tempting. But I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to go. But because for the first time in a while, I felt settled. Not stuck. Not restless. Just calm. So I went. Not to run but to reflect. Ava booked a seaside villa in Santorini, and we spent the evenings eating fresh olives and feta, dipping our toes in warm sand and watching the sun fall into the sea. We didn't talk about Jared. Not once. And that silence was its own kind of closure. On the flight home I opened my journal. Wrote. This isn't the life I expected. It's better. Because it's mine. The day I returned there was a knock on my door. When I opened it I wasn't surprised. Jared stood there, hair longer, eyes darker, shoulders slumped. Not angry. Not demanding. Just there. I heard you were back, he said quietly. You've been asking about me? He nodded. Through Grace. Of course. Grace had kept him updated, per my permission, but only with the bare essentials. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked around the apartment slowly. Stopped at the crib. Touched the edge of the bassinet. This is real, he said. It always was. He nodded. Then sat. I'm not here to fix anything, he said. I know I can't. I waited. I just wanted to say I see it now. What I did. What I didn't do. How I made you feel. And what do you want from me now? I asked. He looked up. Nothing. And for the first time, I believed him. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked, do you know if it's a boy or girl? A girl. He smiled genuinely. That's good. I would have loved either, I said. He nodded. So would I. There was regret. But not manipulation. Not guilt. Just truth. I'm not asking to be part of it, he said. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. About all of it. About you. I stood. Walked to the door. He followed. When he turned to go, I placed a hand gently on his arm. Thank you, I said. He looked surprised. For what? For finally showing up, when I no longer needed you to. He left. And that was the last time I saw him. Not because I was angry, but because I was done giving him space in chapters he no longer belonged in. 3 weeks later, my daughter was born. Mila Grace Whitmore. I kept the last name for now, because it was mine before it was his. And because I no longer carried it with shame. Her birth was quiet, simple, painful and beautiful in equal measure. A soft rain fell outside the hospital window, just like the day I first decided to tell Jared I was pregnant. But this time I wasn't afraid. This time I was whole. I held Mila in my arms that night, skin to skin, and whispered, you were never a mistake. You were never a trap. You were always a light. Peace is not always a feeling. Sometimes it's a decision. To let go. To no longer chase understanding. To stop asking someone to see you when you've already seen yourself. That's where I was. Cradling my daughter in the quiet hours of the morning, the city just beginning to stir outside our window. The hum of taxis, the slow light stretching over buildings, the soft breath of a new life rising and falling on my chest. Mila Grace Whitmore. She was 2 weeks old. Perfect. Whole. So small, and yet the center of my entire universe. My days became rhythms. Feeding. Rocking. Changing. Whispers of lullabies I hadn't known I remembered. I spoke to her constantly. About the sun. About the rain. About how soft her hair was and how I hoped she'd always know that softness wasn't weakness. I told her how brave she was already. I told her that she saved me. Not because she had to, but because her existence forced me to find the parts of myself I'd left behind in the silence of a marriage that had long since lost its warmth. I hadn't heard from Jared since the day he visited. Not until Mila was 18 days old. That morning a package arrived. No return address. Just my name in his handwriting. Inside. A letter. A small plush giraffe. And a locket. Gold. Delicate. Inside. Her initials engraved on one side and a photo of the sonogram I hadn't shown him on the other. I held the letter in my hands for a long time before reading. Mara. I know I failed you. I thought running from responsibility was the same as freedom. I thought silence would protect me from becoming something I didn't feel ready to be. But you didn't run. You didn't shrink. You grew. You chose her. You chose peace. And I understand now why you had to walk away without looking back. You gave our daughter the greatest gift, your whole self. Not a half-love. Not a fractured home. But stability. Strength. And the kind of mother I wish I'd had. If she ever asks about me, tell her I'm proud of her even if I wasn't there to say it. Tell her I'm proud of you. Always. Jared. I read it once. Then again. And finally folded it gently and placed it in Mila's memory box, beneath her hospital bracelet and a photo of her sleeping against my chest. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, but because I had already grieved the version of him I thought I loved. And this was just a quiet ending. Later that evening I clipped the locket around Mila's tiny wrist as she slept, curled into my side. I whispered, "You are surrounded by love, even when it doesn't always look the way we expect." I had no desire to reopen the door. But I didn't hate him. That was the final layer of freedom. Weeks passed. I built a new rhythm. Long stroller walks through the park. Afternoons spent journaling while Mila napped. Nights humming her to sleep with my voice low and steady. I felt more like myself than I had in years. And yet, not the same. Better. More complete. One afternoon I stood at the window holding her against my chest and caught my reflection. No makeup. Hair loose. A tiredness beneath my eyes that only came from love. And I smiled. Because there she was. The woman who had once been afraid to speak up. The woman who had stayed silent too long. The woman who had loved someone who couldn't love her back. Gone. In her place was someone new. A mother. A builder. A woman who didn't just survive betrayal. She turned it into a foundation. 6 months later, I opened a foundation in Mila's name. The Grace Project. A resource network for single mothers. Offering housing support, job training, childcare assistance, and legal counsel for those escaping unhealthy partnerships. We launched with a small event. Nothing flashy. Just real women. Real stories. Real beginnings. And I stood at the podium, Mila on my hip, and spoke into the microphone. This isn't about me. This is about the women who stayed too long, hoping love would heal what silence had already broken. This is about the mothers who rose without applause. And the children who will never have to earn their worth through someone else's approval. The crowd stood. Applauded. But I didn't cry. I held Mila tighter. Because I didn't need the world to validate me. My peace was already here.